Hello, and welcome. Welcome at the fifth JavaScript Competency Center week. We are so glad to have you all here because you could have been anywhere, but you're here with us, and we appreciate it. It's the first day of the week now, and we have a lot of interesting things in stock for you. And also, please don't miss to attend the tomorrow's event with Denis Stuk and Pavel Yuknovich about the lightning fast AWS runtime. And worth mentioning that we also run Meta's lexical contribution weeks. Right now, just started yesterday, so you still can catch up with that. Your host for today, Nazary Romankiv, the certified EPAMer with 5 years under his belt, unstoppable Node.js and cloud enthusiast. And myself, Vladimir Fedosov, Word Solution Architect, brings open source to every company he works at. But enough with the intro. Today we'll be designing the URL shortener. And don't forget to ask questions at the end. We have cookies. Nazary, are you ready to have some fun today?
Yeah, for sure. Thanks for that astonishing introduction, Vladlen. So, shall we start with review of your requirements that you have prepared for me today?
Yeah. So basically, I just got off the call with a client. They want their own URL shortener, right? As usual, it should be exciting. They have a lot of interesting stuff in their mind. Not a lot of requirements, though, right? I see you have already something on your mind. So maybe you can tell us what you have.
So, this is sort of I was brainstorming what we could have, and from your email that I received offline, I heard that your clients want to have like a web and mobile app. They also want to have just a simple, they want to have two plans. One is for free users and another is for paid plans. And they want to have an ability to view analytics as well as ability to edit links. So maybe we should clarify some of those requirements. What kind of features do you want your clients want to have in mobile app? Because it's unusual for like URL shortener to have a mobile app.
Yeah, that's true. And I have a breaking news for this project, right? So it should be ready like quick. Like they want to have a first version in like 3 weeks. So let's try to be creative here, huh? Let's try to slice those requirements.
Okay. Yeah, let's do it. So if we want to do like a project in 3 weeks, let's say it's our NFR, essentially a constraint. Maybe let's start with an MVP. What do you think about essentially stripping everything we don't really need and dropping maybe a mobile app is not required for an MVP, and we start just with a web application?
Yep, sounds good to me.
Okay, then this will be the first thing we could probably drop from our requirements as to form an MVP scope. Then the next thing is, do we really need paid versus free plans? Maybe we should start only with paid users and have like key features available for paid users to start like gaining the revenue.
They really wanted both because they want to acquire clients as well as get some revenue. So we shall have both.
What do you think about the features? Like, maybe let's dive deeper. Like, what kind of features a free versus paid user should have?
Oh, that's a good question. How about like having custom domains for the paid users, and maybe the advanced analytics?
And advanced analytics, okay. What do you mean by advanced analytics?
Oh, that's a good question. We don't know yet. We will need to figure it out.
Okay, I assume the most advanced thing.
Yep.
Okay. And free user, essentially just like basic analytics, maybe something like usage of the links. Usage
Yep.
of the links over time. I think this is it, right? And I guess let's limit the free user capabilities to generate just like 5 links a week, maybe more.
Maybe more.
Yeah, I think this will be configurable, so we don't really. We just need to limit them so that they have a motivation to sort of jump from a free user to a paid user, right? So I think it's a good starting point.
Sounds good to me.
Okay. So we have a web application, we have free users, we have paid users. Do you want to have subscriptions in the app? So it's like recurring payments, or it's will be just something basic, like
Yeah,
the
like
lifetime access.
paid subscription. I'm sorry, the paid users, they definitely should be able to subscribe, right? We don't want them paying every month.
Okay, so that's good. Then question. You mentioned they want to have an ability to edit links, but I wonder if it's just 3 weeks, maybe we should sort of strip this for now and just say you getting this later. Just want to
Uh,
eliminate complexity as much as possible.
so like everyone else has them, has this feature. So let's keep it as a stretch goal, I would say. Let's aim for it, but if we
Okay.
can make it, then make it. We cannot.
I think
Then
we'll
just
have to make some trade-offs while delivering this feature if we want to make it in 3 weeks. Just mindful of NFRs, etc.
oh yeah.
And should a URL be expirable? Like if I create a URL today and I want to expire it in like 2 weeks, do you want to have such a feature?
I think this can be put aside for now.
Okay, no expire, great. And okay, do we have a limitation on what can be in the short URL? Do we allow a user to insert the custom short URL? I think maybe it can be for a paid user.
Yeah, like vanilla URIs. Yeah, no, not the vanilla, the vanity ones. Yeah, that's for sure.
Okay, and I guess for basic users, we just have like sort of random generated short URLs, right?
Yep, and we want them to be unique.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. Otherwise, this wouldn't be working.
Yeah, that's true.
Okay, so I think last question is the most critical for us on a functional requirements. I think we need some limitations on the characters we can put in the URL, right? Something like A to Z is uppercase, and 0 to 9. No special characters, just
I
letters
would
and numbers.
I would say it's up to you. You decide.
Let's say this will be a good starting point, and we can return to it like if we see any limitations on the NFRs, because it really depends on how unique, how big URLs and how much unique URLs we can generate.
Yep.
So I think that's a good starting point to sort of move on to NFRs, and then we can reiterate on this, just mindful of time. So I also remember in your email that I saw that you sort of looking for a really huge application. It's like 10K requests per second and 1 billion links of volume. Is that still true? And just if it's a new application and you want to deliver it in 3 weeks,
So
this.
this is a very very good question. So they want to aim for it, right? But right now we are flexible.
Okay. So I think, let's say we could sort of start with really small sort of design, and then build out something and show how we could sort of transition into this architecture that will support that much of a scale, right? And then a few more questions about NFR. We have uptime. What about uptime, by the way? I guess the application should be available like 3 nines,
100%, huh?
100%.
How hard would it
Yeah.
be, huh?
I think we both know that we need some error budget, and we will need to negotiate with our clients to sort of give us some space for errors, because we're also humans. You can deliver 100% viable software.
No. Here we have only money budget, no error budget.
Yeah, we'll have to work hard to negotiate for this error budget to have some time for application to be down.
Yeah, I think it should be fine.
Okay, so let's let's say it's a new application. We have 3 weeks. We don't have much traffic, it seems to me, in the first day. Let's establish just a basic concept and see how we could sort of evolve with it over time, right?
Yep.
So let's say we have a web app. Essentially, this is like an application through which a user, right, a user can interact and sort of create and see analytics, right? So we have a web app and a user who interacts with it, create and view analytics, right? So this web app definitely needs some API or a backend, right? And it talks to it to create the pages, right? To create the short links and get analytics. And then we definitely need some storage, some database. We will talk about the database selection a little bit later, but in general, definitely need some database to sort of store the data. Let me color it in a different color to sort of show that this is our backend, this is our data layer, and this is our sort of client front end. Then essentially what we need to do next, we essentially have a few APIs that we need to develop, right? If we want to establish like what we need to do. We need to do some API endpoint to create a URL, like post short, like URLs, right? This URL will be creating one, and then we need an endpoint through which a user will be accessing the long URL using a short URL, right? This is two basic features we need. We really want here. We also want to have some probably get endpoints to get analytics, but we will sort of delve into them a bit later. Let's talk about get endpoint for a sec because it's really important. Since we want to have analytics, this endpoint should be returning a redirection rule essentially for a user to redirect him to a long URL. And here we have a choice. Do we want to use 301 or we want to use 302? So 301 means permanently moved, and 302 means temporarily moved. Since we want to have analytics and we don't want this sort of response to be cached on the CDNs or in local browsers, right? We need this essentially needs to return 02 and a header location with long URL, right?
Good call.
In that way, we will ensure that each time someone accesses this short URL, we will be able to sort of remember the analytics. So this is sort of a basic concept, right? We have a web app with a UI. Then we also have an API endpoint, and when the user interacts through it, apparently not directly, but through a browser, right? They will be using get endpoint to get some kind of short URL, right? XYZ, let's say XQY. So this is a basic concept. Now, I think it's time to start addressing key functional requirements step by step, right? And sort of improving this. And then we will start working on non-functional requirements. So what we have a basic features. So far we have like a capability for a user to create a URL to view it, but now we need to start. How do we manage payments, right? Let's tackle these big problems.
What do you think about the database at this point? Because we haven't talked much about it, and it should be pretty interesting. Which one would you pick?
I was thinking to talk about database a bit later, but in general, it's a good call. So what we need is a lot of so we need a lot of to handle a lot of read requests, and this is the majority of it. So there is two options here. In general, in the market, you have SQL and NoSQL, and we also have requirements to be sort of transactional at one moment for like payments, right, for creation of this data. But at the same time, we want analytics and be able to query the data. And if we project this in the future, this will require like analytical queries, right? For a start, just because the application is small, right, and we have really small timelines, I would say this needs to be an SQL database, just because SQL databases, they do offer both, like transactions, and at the same time you can run some pretty decent analytical queries on them if you thanks to the SQL, right? Taking consideration that we just need to develop it in like 3 weeks, this will be a good trade-off because you can sort of run both transactions and at the same time run sort of analytical queries of it when you need it, right? And then long term, if we really go to a scale of like billion links, 10K RPS, and then we have like really complex analytics, we would need to sort of do something more complicated, like introducing a separate database for like analytics, right? Like Snowflake. But that's like really huge into the future. In 3 weeks, one SQL database should be good enough for us.
So they already have quite a bit of traffic, right? And I heard that you really love cloud solutions. So maybe cloud providers can help us here to ramp up quickly while still sustaining. What do we have, like 10,000 requests per second? That's pretty substantial.
So indeed, if they already have that much of a traffic, so what we could do is, if we say we could use some serverless offerings, albeit they will cost more money, that are optimized for read access, right? Like DynamoDB, for example. The idea of DynamoDB is that it's by default is sharded. So you have a partition key in your database. In our example, a partition key could be like a URL, a short URL, right? So that it's quick for access. So essentially, your data will be sharded across different sort of instances under the hood, and it's really quick for access, right? So if you consider 10K RPS, I think DynamoDB can be sort of a good starting point here just to manage sort of transactional data. But then DynamoDB is really sort of bad in case you want to run a lab sort of transactions, right? When you want analytics. So we would need to sort of have like stream of data, go into some kind of a lab database. For example, it could be, if we talk about cloud native options, it could be Redshift, which is an AWS offering for running really on scale lab databases.
Yeah, looks really good. And I believe we can pitch this kind of solution much easier to them because it looks more fancy.
Yeah, definitely. Like, yeah, I agree with you. If we want to sort of pitch it to them. So the next thing I also want to sort of introduce here, if you want to have DynamoDB for like fast access, the next thing would be is introducing sort of a pipeline. How do we get the analytics here? So essentially, each time if someone gets a short URL, we need to add the data to the database, right? But we don't want to do it here in the GET request, so we need a queue, right? A queue, and when someone wants to query the one URL, we essentially push an event to the queue, and then later we ingest it to the Redshift. In that way, we make sure that sort of the fast the read request remains super fast, right?
Yeah, looks really good. What about the payments? Will we handle them in DynamoDB, or do we still need an SQL here?
Well, let's make a next step. I just want to make sure we sort of show how the solution evolves over time, right? Next step is payments. So in general, the best practice is not interact with do not interact with sort of payments directly. Usually you have like a payment provider, right? In our case, I would say Stripe is sort of the god of payment providers. And it's quite globally available across multiple markets. Do you know in which countries your client operates? Maybe it's UK, USA.
Oh, that's going to be just USA and Europe.
Okay, then Stripe should be good enough for us as a payment provider. So essentially what we will need to do to integrate payments. We won't be interacting with payments directly, right? So we will have a hosted payment page approach. Essentially, when the user wants to make a payment on our website, we would be redirecting him to a Stripe, right? So essentially, we will be redirecting him to a payment provider. Then the user makes a payment there, right? So we're making a redirect, hit pay, then user on a payment provider like Stripe makes a payment, and our backend at this moment essentially can pull the information or receive it via webhook, right, from the Stripe about the payments.
Looks
in that
really
case,
nice. So you suggest using one of their hosted checkouts, right? So we don't need to do anything with payments at all, right?
exactly. So the goal here is to first, it's really fast and quick. Again, we have just 3 weeks, so we need to move fast and be creative with what we do, right? So we will use their hosted payment solution. So when you make a payment, you don't have to do anything, implement anything in our application, right? We just redirect the user to a hosted page in Stripe with some of our styles, logo and branding. They make a payment, and then we and our backend sort of gets information from Stripe that this payment is made. And it's nice and clean. We don't have to care about PCI DSS, right? A compliance payment card sort of issuer compliance, right? So we don't need to do any compliance here because it's all managed by Stripe for us.
You know, I think I have a word for this approach. It says zero code development here, in action.
Sort of. You still would have to do some coding to sort of insert some snippets on your web app to do some redirects and in some backend code. But yeah.
Oh, we can do that. This is good.
Okay. So let me just make it a bit bolder. So we have payments. At this moment, again, answering your question, do we need an SQL database for it? Frankly speaking, if we use a payment provider and we don't do anything fancy, we can really easy use just the DynamoDB for this, right? It's fast, and it also supports transactions on a single record and even a group of records with the recent update.
No.
So it should be good enough to store this information like a confirmation, right? Whether this customer have paid or not, and whether they can be treated as a payment as a paid user, right?
Yeah, sounds good. I'm wondering if that transactional feature already available not for Java in 2024. Back then it was Java only.
As far as I remember, it's globally available. Like you just have to pay like extra if like the way you pay in DynamoDB, you pay so-called request units, right? Write read units, sorry, different database units. So you have write units and you have read units. And if you use a transactional units, you essentially like doubling the cost for the usage, but it's still the same API, as far as I remember.
Okay. Yeah, let's assume that. That sounds good. And even if it's not, we can still use some Java here.
Yeah, we just plug and play, especially if you're using a native, if we're using AWS and we don't really care about being cloud agnostic, we can always spin up like another Lambda function, if you know what I mean. That will be doing some crazy stuff for us, just specifically Java, Lambda. You could always do that.
Okay, let's see what else we have in the requirements here.
So we have payments. We have, it's kind of interesting to talk a lot about database and payments, but we don't talk about registration and login. Maybe we should discuss how a user would sort of log in into our application.
That's a good call. Any no-code options in your mind?
Ooh, good catch. So, no, one of the first things that comes to my mind, if you talk about something cloud native, is Cognito. Is essentially like a AWS IAM service which provides you a sort of hosted login page with a social support. If you want to opt out for something more sort of cloud agnostic, we can go for a market. There is like Clerk for Next.js app, as far as I remember. It does require you to write quite a lot of code. There is also really out of the box OpenAUth features. They now sort of provide this, and some other sort of alternatives like Firebase probably. But I think
Have you heard about Octa's Auth0?
I heard I have worked with Okta in the previous, but when you say Auth0, you mean passwordless authorization, or you mean
It's gonna be like Cognito. So,
okay.
folks, if you haven't heard about that yet, this is a really good product. It saves a lot of time. But hey, I see that you're really confident with AWS. So what's up with that Cognito? We just use it and we are ready to go.
It requires a bit of work to do, like integrating it with your database to sort of store the user information and stuff, right? And also integrating your sort of backend to keep track that your users actually registered, etc., managing accesses, right? But in general, it does provide you a hosted page. You can actually just host a page of Cognito. So essentially, when user wants to do something, we can have a hosted page, login registration page, and it will support social login, right? So essentially, the goal here is that we probably want our users to be able to log in with help of some kind of identity providers like Google, Facebook, right?
Oh yeah, especially the Apple ID on a smartphone.
Apple ID. Oh yeah,
that's gonna be a killer feature for us.
Actually, speaking of Apple, I mean, we didn't mention, but another benefit of using something like Stripe that you don't have to spend a lot of time managing Google Pay, Apple Pay, PayPal, and all of these payment methods, right? It's all already available most of the times on the hosted pages.
Yep, that's true. Last year I did in one day the Google Pay, Apple Pay, all in what I spent like 5 hours with a WordPress. That was super easy with Stripe.
Yeah, that's cool. And I remember my experience on project when we were integrating with Barclays directly, and it was like months of effort to interact with the bank API like directly and manage all of that. And then you also have to do a lot of work to manage certificates.
Yeah, and can you imagine then you also need to integrate shipping there to calculate different options? So yeah, that would have been a mess.
Yeah, but we don't have a shipping luckily.
Yeah, no shipping here.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay, so we have
high level something like this. Yeah, so we did login, we did registration, we have a hosted page, really quick and fast. We probably haven't written here like more than like 100 lines of code to just do some plumbing here and there. Work with Cognito, check the plans, manage payments. What's next? We could talk more about subscriptions. Well, frankly speaking, Stripe supports this out of the box, right? So we don't really need to do much here, right?
Right. How would we generate those URIs?
Yeah, this is a good topic.
And how unique they should be, considering that we have custom domains?
So even if you have a custom domain, right? We could talk about custom domains later, like how we approach them. But essentially, we still would have the same sort of storage, right? I know that you want to deploy a separate tenant for a separate domain, right? It's like an overkill. We could go with that option. It simplifies your life a lot. But if you want to sort of have unique we must have unique short URL. So let's talk how we could generate them. So basic principle, right? Let's take this data real quick for a sec. So essentially, what characters we have? We have A to Z lowercase, uppercase, and 0 to 9, right? So what we have here is 62 characters, right? So
Yeah.
if we do some math, and we have at least 1 billion of links already, right? So we understand that we need to have a long enough URL to be able to withstand 1 billion of links, right? So let's do some math. So I specifically for this task, I have a calculator open here.
Whoa.
So, yeah. So let's say if you have 3 characters and you put it to a power of and if you put it to a power of 62, that gives you how much sort of unique combinations you have. Oops, wrong. No, that's
Man, you know what I'm thinking about? We need lava lamps. We need wall of lava lamps like Cloudflare does for random generator. So our URIs are really, really unique. Could you imagine that?
huh.
We have a
Cloudflare.
yeah. If folks, if you haven't seen that, Google Cloudflare lava lamps. This is just crazy. They have a camera taking a video stream of a lava lamps, and they just do randomizer based on that video stream. This is just amazing. Maybe we can here do just 3 lava lamps, huh? We have only 3 weeks here.
Well, who knows? Who knows? I don't think we have much
Okay, yeah,
lamps.
you're right. That's
I think we
completely
can do
correct.
something simpler, like just generate like picking a 7 symbols long,
Uh-huh.
and it gives you like around three of like as far as I remember 3 trillions of URLs. If we have a 62 characters, this already should give us like plenty of space as far as I remember.
Yeah, that should be enough.
But
How do you want to ensure that they are unique?
so, I was thinking about this, and there is essentially 2 options we have. Option 1, let's say, is do it lazy, sort of on demand, right? DynamoDB is really great when you need to get a sort of a fast access to the by a partition key, right? But in our case, we agree that the partition key equals short URL because a short URL is what's unique in our database, right? So option 1 is essentially let's generate it on demand, and then we will have to sort of query and see whether there is an existing URL already sort of in the database. We could do some optimizations. We could sort of generate like to ensure that we have to reduce the response times and handle collisions. We could generate like 5 URLs, check all, and then pick the first one available.
Okay.
Something
Yeah,
like this, just to make it scalable.
this sounds simple enough, and the simpler the better.
Yeah, I think
So
for our case, this should be good enough. Again, another option, if we want to go like really crazy, what we could do, we could sort of have a separate collection with like pre-generated URLs, and then we could have like a separate cron job. Let's say if you're already talking technically, we could have some kind of lambda running on a cron job, and that would sort of get us, generate URLs.
do you really think this is necessary here?
I don't think so, because again, in our case, it's I think DynamoDB is good enough since you're already using it. It's fast for an access by a partition key, really instant. We can just generate, and in future, we can just generate more URLs and check all of them, and it will be quite fast, and then take the first one. So I think I don't really see a benefit of using here a generator, like a separate process to pre-generate URLs. And I think we take into consideration that we really want to run real quick and fast. And 3 weeks, I think we just need to take the simplest approach here, take shortcut and just do this. And then later down the road, we can also always refactor if we ever see a problem with this.
Yeah, sounds good. We have just 4 minutes left before we have a Q&A session.
No way.
Yeah, could you imagine? Let's try to talk about something like real crazy, right? What if we want to really have a low latency here. So let's imagine our client is in Europe and our server is in the US. We don't want that latency to happen. We want to be as close to the customer as possible.
So
let's throw away the 3 weeks limitation. How would you do that?
So if you really think about it, that's a really great challenge. So essentially, what you're talking about is multi-region deploy, right? Essentially, we need like one in like Europe and another deploy somewhere in USA, right? Because essentially,
do we need everything replicated or just some pieces? What do you think?
So if we think about this, we definitely need the data here. So DynamoDB supports sort of out of the box, sort of with help of the streams. It can it can replicate to different sort of regions. So we definitely need fast access data, short URLs for which you will be using, for which your clients will be using to actually get the access to the long URLs, right? Mm-hmm. Analytical data, I think we're good enough to just have it in one sort of, eventually have it in one region, right?
Because, good call.
But what we need is really a database that will be replicated and that will have short URLs, and then we need some sort of component that will host our API that will provide access to these URLs to our clients, right? So something like Fargate could do the work. Again, we already vendor lock-in. Using something like Fargate should be good enough. It's a serverless containerized solution. We can just infinitely scale our containers. We could consider adding a cache on top of DynamoDB. There is so-called DAX component, if you talk about speed, really. Right?
Oh, that's going to be quick. And we can pair this with the DynamoDB global tables, I believe, which will give us multi-region replication out of the box.
Yep. There is, I forgot about global tables, but
that's a neat feature. We just rarely use it. It's a pretty complex use case.
Definitely. So we could do really global tables. The reason, again, if we wouldn't have analytics, like frankly speaking, we could just do CloudFront, put it on the top, and add a cache on a CDN, and that would solve all our problems. Because if we don't have analytics, right, we don't really care how much our clients open the links, right? We don't need this analytical data. Then we could just cache it on the CDN for like hours, the response from our API, and it would work like globally in like milliseconds for the clients, hosted on the edge.
How about the approach if we build analytics based on the access log of the CloudFront?
I was actually thinking about this, and this was like a crazy thing, So essentially, a CloudFront is providing like logs to a CloudWatch, right? And then we could essentially get these logs somewhere to like S3 bucket, whatever.
Yep.
And then have something like Amazon Athena to query this data for you and build sort of analytics. Boom. And now you can cache your data on the CDN and using the logs of the CDN to build the analytics from the logs. And then you essentially don't need all of that complexity, right? You can just have one region hosted somewhere, and you have just like a cache here, but you still have all the logs available to you. And this seems like really a quick option that we could do, right? Like maybe not in 3 weeks, definitely.
but maybe in 4, huh?
Maybe in 4 or 5, yeah.
Okay, sounds good. And I think we have only 9 minutes left just for the Q&A. Thank you for this really, really interesting and truly cloud-native solution. That was a really interesting discussion here. Huh?
Yeah, likewise. Thank you. So let's jump to the question.
Do we have any?
I see some questions in the chat. So essentially, let me start and copy pasting them here.
Yeah, go ahead
for everyone. So essentially, a question from Alexandra Pardo. How to have caching? What types were in the infrastructure? So I think we already addressed the caching question. So essentially, if you have a requirement to have analytics, you can't have a cache sort of on a web app or like sort of on CDN layer, right? On a CDN. Unless you do something crazy like this when you sort of build your analytics from the logs. Otherwise, what we already discussed, right? You could have a cache for your database to ensure that your requests from your servers to the database are really sort of fast and furious. Okay.
Do you have any other questions?
Next question. Vitaly, Vladlen, do you want to address this one from Vitaly?
Which one?
Is it okay to consider PVA for a web application as a quick replacement for a mobile app?
Oh, that's a really good one. So I'm not really an expert in the mobile apps. However, what I know for sure is that first of all, PWA wouldn't get you an access to the app stores, right? There are even some limitations specifically for
Yeah,
the
I remember
iOS.
Apple did it,
Yep,
right? They
yep,
essentially forbid like people who do PVA to publish it on a mobile app
yep,
store.
yep. And now in the European Union, they reduced the PWA support for the iOS devices because of the new EU regulations. So it's kind of not really a bulletproof approach at this moment. I would say that the tiny Flutter, yeah, could be React Native, whatever you call it,
When I'm
whatever.
thinking about Flutter, Flutter is really good, become really good recently, and React Native also has this feature now. But in Flutter, you can do both mobile app and web app from the same code base. At least they claim to have it. And React Native just recently launched something similar. So what do you think? Maybe if these tools would have an access, like sort of a capability to build both web app and mobile from one code base, like this ideal world, maybe
Oh,
this could fit our case. Because I know
that
Flutter could do this.
that would be a dream. Also, I still feel that here there may be a big difference between the web application and the mobile one. I doubt that you will build in the full blown analytics within the mobile.
Yeah, you
But
probably
hey,
would want something quick.
yeah. Yeah, so we have a couple of options here, right? I believe we can consider it answered.
Yeah. So, guys, do you have any other questions so far?
Anything, anyone? If not, I have a question. Okay, well, people are
I guess
thinking.
we either have done such a great a design or we did such a failure that no one even wants to ask the question.
Yeah, they're like, what is that, right?
Yeah, that's like
Some gibber jabber.
this will never work.
So I have a question. So how do you think we talked about, like, bringing content closer to the user? Yeah, but how would you identify to which server should serve the request from the user, basically typing in a URL in a browser, right? How would you
So
know that?
you have a DNS for it, right? So essentially,
Okay.
we don't have it anywhere, right? Who cares
Yeah.
about DNS? But essentially, you have a DNS server, and each time someone opens a browser and types in something, right? Your browser goes to a DNS. In our case, it could be Amazon Road 53. It's an Amazon hosted DNS, and it claims to have 100% availability, right?
Oh, yeah.
And then,
Considering the architecture of a DNS, I can believe in that, right? They have
yeah,
what, like 5 layers of cache there?
yeah, and like in each region, in each sort of local variant, and then
Yep.
in the source, and then you have like backups and everything. Yeah, I could believe in that as well. So essentially, we need a DNS. You enter the URL, you register your sort of domain against the DNS, and then when you enter it, the DNS returns an IP address that leads to sort of CDN provider, in our case.
Good. And I believe we have a new question.
To be.
Yeah, on YouTube. So the question is, wait, does DynamoDB supports it shared and replicated in different regions at the same time?
So That's a great question. So by default, like if you remember the global tables features that Vladimir mentioned, by default, essentially, the design of DynamoDB is done in that way that you have sort of a partitioned data in different files, and then you have different nodes that essentially don't really know about like what kind of data they're serving, because it's sort of a SaaS sort of database, right? It's serverless, and it's not like you deploy an SQL database, which sort of a physical instance that really knows what kind of data it works with. If you read the paper about DynamoDB, you will find really a lot of interesting information. There is, I remember I saw it, but essentially there is really good white paper about how they handle availability and all of that. But the idea is, yes, it can do it. It essentially stores your data in different partitionings, means files, and then any of their sort of nodes, they can get the data for you because they don't really tie it to a specific, like SQL database, and then you have a node that's specifically tied to this piece of data. And then then you can sort of replicate it to a different region. At the same time, I know companies do this like with SQL, like Postgres and stuff, as far as I know, right?
Oh
People
yeah.
do it.
Oh yeah.
Like it's not like it's some specific feature for DynamoDB. Like people do it.
Yeah. Folks at Meta has it for SQL nailed. They have globally distributed databases easy,
Exactly.
just in a few clicks. And also remember that it all goes down to the cup theorem,
Yeah.
right? The consistency, availability, and the partition tolerance, right? So if you use the DynamoDB in its global table configuration, essentially you're sacrificing on the consistency, because that setup going to be eventually consistent, right? And eventually it's going to be consistent, and so it will be highly available, right? And partition tolerant. But that kind of limits a little bit your options, right? And the capabilities.
Exactly. And if you're interested about sort of sharding and everything in SQL, you can look for Cetus. It's a distributed Postgres SQL as an extension. It's a Microsoft product. Essentially, it's a Postgres SQL extension that makes your Postgres SQL sort of natively sharded, and they do quite a lot of stuff for you. Quite an interesting paper to read if you really have some time to dive and figure out how SQL databases can be sharded and multi-region.
Yep. And I believe we have one more question, right?
Where do you find them?
I just opened to YouTube. So the question from Vitaly: what about using the Redis memcached integration, which will be responsible for GET requests, get full URL value, quote unquote, instead of DynamoDB? Will it be efficient?
Quick answer: DAX is Redis.
Here you go.
Well, as far as I remember, at least when I was passing the certification, it's essentially DAX is Redis. It's actually integrated Redis into DynamoDB. You just don't see it much. Like it's already there. Alternative would be just sort of having Redis somewhere there separately. But why do that if you could have really a nice and integrated service with your DynamoDB?
Yep. And can you even have a good persistency with Redis? I believe it was writing on the disk by intervals or something.
Well, actually, if we want to talk about Redis, you can actually configure it to have append at the end file. So essentially, each operation could be flashed to the disk at the end of an operation. So essentially, you can have like a log file. When you sort of when you store different operations as you go. Redis can be quite persistent if you know how to configure it. It can have buffers on the file. It can have append only files with logs of operations, and then you just put like clusters of Redis. And I know one gaming company runs Redis as their primary storage, and they have like 10,000 requests per second, and they just do Redis. They don't have anything else, and they just run Redis. That's how it's like another tool you could use.
You can use that Redis for everything. I've been using Redis even as a queue.
Yeah, have you heard of Redis extensions? Like you can have like extensions for Redis that do like full search, that do for you Okay, let me find you something like Redis search. Redis search that gives you like a full text query, Redis JSON, and you also can have something like lambdas on Redis. I believe they call it Redis gears.
Whoa.
Yeah, programmable engine for data processing. So essentially, this is a really cool feature where you can sort of write your Python code, deploy it onto Redis, right on the node where you have the data, and do some crazy stuff.
I'm wondering if with all these extensions, they finally built a good UI for managing that Redis.
There is an open source one that I know, Redis Insights. It's quite good.
Okay.
It's
Because
it's the best.
really, whoa, this is cool. Because 4 years ago, I was Googling for Redis UI for Mac, and I was like, yeah, there are a couple, but they doesn't work.
Yeah. So I think we answered even more questions
Oh, yeah.
than they asked about the Redis. So do you have any more gentlemen and ladies? We
Last
will
chance.
wait. Yeah, a bit. Last change to ask hot questions about system design. Maybe while we're sort of waiting for someone to drop last change question, write down in the comments under this video what kind of system design interview you would love to see next. Like what system, what task? Maybe it should be a crawler. Maybe it should be a search engine. Just tell us what you would want to see, and we for sure will make a separate session. Thank you for the role play. It's a great show. Yeah, you're welcome, Alexei.
Yeah. Thank you for watching it.
Yeah, there is no actor without a viewer.
I'm wondering if we'll count this remark as a question to give out a prize, huh? I believe we should.
Well, Alexei
No?
asked quite a decent question about sort of sharding
Okay.
and he had a question about sort of sharding and replicating into different regions. So I think I love the question. It's quite complex one, and just because he complimented us, I think he wins the prize for the best question, right?
Oh yeah, that's for sure. Agree here. That was a smart move, huh?
Yeah. Next time you want a prize, compliment us, and we will find you. Yeah. So I think we're good to go. There is no more questions. Then I think
Yeah.
we can close this system design interview and start implementing it. And see you in 3 weeks when we have a working solution.
Yeah, and share and subscribe, huh?
Definitely. And don't forget, tomorrow we have a next event in our talks that is called LRT Lightning Fast AWS JavaScript Runtime. So
Whoa.
sounds really interesting. If you want to know about it, visit us tomorrow and see you on JavaScript Competitive Center Week.